The bells of St. James's tolled through a veil of rain, their mournful clang echoing across the grey sprawl of London. The city seemed to hold its breath, as if reluctant to bear witness to the union that day. Beneath the towering arches of the cathedral, hundreds of candles trembled in their sconces, their small flames struggling against draughts that whispered of omen. The bride stood motionless before the altar, Lady Evangeline Moreau, the last daughter of a family once gilded by fortune, now reduced to quiet desperation. The pearls at her throat shimmered faintly, like tears too proud to fall. The groom, Edmund Harland, Duke of Evermere, was the picture of composure, tall, solemn, devastatingly still. His hair, the color of dark oak, caught the faintest glint of gold beneath the church's fractured light. He did not look at his bride. His gaze remained fixed on the marble floor, as though he could read some ancient truth hidden in its veined stone. Around them, the congregation waited in reverent discomfort. Society adored a scandal, but it preferred its beginnings wrapped in lace and reverence. When the vows were spoken, Evangeline's voice quivered only once. She said, "I do," as though offering not consent but surrender. Edmund's answer came low, steady, and almost cold, a man sealing a contract rather than claiming a wife. The priest smiled faintly, mistaking restraint for virtue, and pronounced them bound. Applause fluttered through the pews, too polite to be joyous. The Duke bowed his head, but when the moment came, the customary kiss, the air shifted. He did not move. Evangeline waited, the silence stretching unbearably. The candles hissed. Somewhere a child coughed, and an elderly dowager muttered, "Good heavens!" The Duke merely offered his arm, distant and formal, guiding his new bride down the aisle as though she were a guest to be escorted, not a wife to be claimed. Outside, the rain had ceased, but the streets still glistened, mirrors for the humiliation that followed her every step. The carriage ride to Evermere House was wordless. The wheels groaned against cobblestones slick with drizzle. Evangeline sat with her gloved hands clasped tightly in her lap, the ivory of her gown already dulled by the journey. Across from her, Edmund watched the city recede into grayness, his expression unreadable but not unfeeling. Once his fingers twitched as if tempted to reach for her, but the impulse died before it began. When they arrived, the great doors of Evermere opened to a symphony of whispers. Servants lined the corridor, their curiosity poorly veiled behind bows and curtsies. The house was immense, a cathedral of wealth, all mirrors and mahogany, but it felt colder than the rain outside. Evangeline's slippers barely whispered against the marble as she followed him through corridors heavy with ancestral portraits. The faces of long-dead Harlands watched her passage with judgmental calm. At the grand staircase, the Duke paused. "Your chambers have been prepared," he said, his tone impeccable, his diction faultless. Yet beneath it was something strained, as if emotion had been folded neatly and locked away. "Will you not join me for supper, Your Grace?" she asked quietly, the question a fragile olive branch extended into frost. He looked at her then, truly looked. For a heartbeat, she saw not the Duke, but the man beneath the title, weary, haunted, almost human. "I cannot," he said softly. "There are matters that require my attention." It was a gentle refusal, yet it pierced sharper than cruelty. She inclined her head with practiced grace, though her stomach felt hollow. "As you wish." That night, the household slept beneath the hush of propriety, but rumors took flight like restless ghosts. The maids, whispering in the scullery, wondered if the marriage had been arranged for debt. The footmen speculated in hushed tones about some lost mistress, or worse, a secret illness. By dawn, every corner of Evermere knew. The Duke had not gone to his wife. Evangeline lay awake in her vast, unfamiliar bed. The silence pressed against her like a weight. Outside her window, the night rain returned, tracing silver threads down the glass. She turned her wedding ring between her fingers, gold, flawless, and cold. She thought of the girl she had been only weeks ago, believing herself chosen, believing love might still dwell in such a man. But reality had come clothed in velvet and indifference. The Duke's restraint was a riddle she could not solve. pride told her to match his silence with her own, yet her heart, lonely and defiant, ached for even the smallest sign that he felt something. Anything. Near midnight, unable to bear the stillness, she rose and wandered the gallery. The portraits seemed to shift in the candlelight, their painted eyes following her. She stopped before one, the previous Duchess of Evermere, a woman of rare beauty whose gaze seemed both mournful and wise. Beneath the frame, a brass plaque read, Arabella Harlan, beloved wife, 1812 to 1830. Evangeline studied the painted smile and shivered. Beloved wife. 2 words that already felt like a cruel jest. A sound behind her, a faint rustle. She turned swiftly. Edmund stood in the doorway, half shrouded in shadow. His cravat hung loose, his expression drawn. He looked as though he had not expected to find her there. You should be resting, he said. Her lips parted, but the words caught. Sleep eludes me. He nodded slowly, stepping closer. The faint scent of sandalwood reached her, distant, restrained, yet unmistakably his. This house takes time to grow used to, he murmured. It holds its silences. I am learning that quickly, she replied, her tone polite, but her eyes did not yield. Their gazes met, his guarded, hers searching. The distance between them seemed carved not by space, but by something older and crueler. For a moment, she thought he might say more, but instead he bowed his head. Good night, my lady. He turned away, his footsteps fading down the corridor, leaving only the echo of what might have been. When she returned to her chamber, dawn's first light had begun to seep through the curtains. It touched the edges of her wedding gown, still draped across the chair like a ghost of the woman she had been yesterday. She sat before the mirror, her reflection pale and unblinking. Somewhere within the house, a clock began to chime, slow, deliberate, unfeeling. Each toll felt like a verdict. She whispered to her reflection, so, this is marriage. Below, in the Duke's private study, Edmund stood by the window, watching the same dawn spread over the city. His hands were clenched behind his back, his jaw tight, with something perilously close to regret. On his desk lay an unopened letter sealed with black wax, the remnants of a past he could neither destroy nor confess. The final bell tolled. He closed his eyes briefly as though to silence it, yet the sound lingered, echoing through the corridors, through the walls, through her heart. And thus began 7 years of silence. 7 years in which the Duke of Evermere did not once touch his wife. 7 years had passed since the rain-soaked wedding that bound the Duke and Duchess of Evermere in name, but not in touch. In that time, the seasons had come and gone like polite visitors who never lingered. The house itself seemed caught in perpetual twilight, haunted by the absence of laughter. Yet, within those years of silence, something curious had occurred. Lady Evangeline had grown beautiful in her sorrow. She had become a creature of quiet fascination to London's glittering circle, a duchess who smiled with perfect grace, but never danced twice with the same man. They called her the Porcelain Duchess, as if beauty could excuse her loneliness. Each season, she attended the necessary events, fulfilling her duties with poise that bordered on martyrdom. The Duke, when he appeared beside her, was courteous, measured, and impossibly distant. Together, they were the picture of refinement and the perfect scandal waiting to happen. That winter, Evermere Hall prepared to host its first grand ball in years. The invitation alone caused a tremor through the ton. Whispers rippled through drawing rooms like wildfire. Had the Duke finally thawed? Would the Duchess reclaim her husband's favor? Even those who despised gossip sharpened their curiosity. The evening arrived beneath a frostbitten moon. Carriages gleamed beneath gaslight, and the drive was lined with torches that flickered like jealous eyes. Inside, the ballroom shimmered in hues of gold and cream. Violins swelled beneath the crystal chandeliers, scattering light like diamond dust. The Duchess descended the staircase in a gown of pale lavender silk, her shoulders bare beneath a drape of gossamer lace. Her hair, swept high with amethyst pins, caught the glow of every candle. Conversation faltered when she appeared. The Duke stood at the foot of the stairs, immaculate in black. His expression revealed nothing, yet a muscle in his jaw tightened as he looked upon her. as if seeing beauty he had long forbidden himself to notice. She curtsied, and he bowed, their gestures flawless, rehearsed by years of civility. But in that moment, something imperceptible flickered between them. A tremor, a question neither dared name. Throughout the night, Evangeline moved among her guests like a soft wind stirring petals. She spoke with charm, never warmth. She smiled, but only with her lips. Yet, beneath her practiced composure, she felt the Duke's gaze follow her, constant as a pulse. It was not affection. Not yet, but it was no longer indifference. Near midnight, as laughter spilled from the card-room and champagne bubbled like liquid gold, a footman approached her discreetly. "Your Grace," he murmured, bowing low, "a gift has arrived, addressed to you alone." A gift. Such words had long since lost their sweetness. Still, curiosity stirred. She followed him to the small, withdrawing room adjoining the terrace. There, upon a velvet cushion, lay a box of dark rosewood, small and exquisitely carved. No note accompanied it, only her name etched in delicate script upon the lid. Evangeline opened it slowly. Inside rested a brooch, a violet of enamel and pearls, fashioned into the shape of a teardrop. It was beautiful, intimate, and unmistakably personal. She traced its curve with gloved fingers, a faint tremor of unease passing through her. No one, not even the Duke, had given her a token since the wedding day. Moments later, the door opened behind her. "You seem troubled, Your Grace," came a voice smooth as satin. Lord Pembroke, charming, careless, and far too perceptive. His gaze flicked to the brooch. "Ah, a secret admirer, perhaps?" Her lips tightened. "Merely a trinket, I imagine. It will be returned in the morning." Pembroke smiled, all mock gallantry. "Return it? My dear Duchess, mystery becomes you. Keep it. Let the Duke wonder who dares adore what he ignores." He left her with that poisonous suggestion, and though she dismissed it aloud, the words clung like smoke. The Duke would wonder, and society would not forgive the curiosity. By the next morning, rumor had already taken root. In parlors and parlors alike, whispers bloomed with malicious grace. The Duchess received a gift, not from her husband, and she kept it. Servants carried tales from hall to hall. An embroidered lie became embroidered truth. At breakfast, the Duke said nothing, but the stillness between them was sharp enough to wound. Evangeline poured his tea with steady hands. "You have heard it, then?" she asked, her voice calm, her gaze lowered. His silver spoon clicked against the porcelain. "I have heard much," he replied. "Then you know it false." "I know nothing of your secrets," he said, quietly, though his tone carried an edge she had never heard before. She met his eyes then, unflinching. "I have no secrets, Edmund." The sound of his name on her tongue, after so many years of Your Grace, struck him like a blow. He looked away first. "The brooch," he said, "where is it?" "In my chamber," she answered. "I intended to return it as soon as I discovered its sender." "And who is he?" "I do not know." He studied her face, searching for deception and finding only exhaustion. "You must think me a fool," he said. "No," she whispered. "Only a stranger." The silence that followed was worse than accusation. He rose, leaving his untouched breakfast and his wife behind. She watched him go, her composure cracking only when the door closed. By dusk, the scandal had ripened. A note arrived and signed, claiming that the violet brooch had once belonged to the late Duchess Arabella, Edmund's mother. The implication was cruelly clear. The token had not been sent by a lover, but by someone within his own household, someone intent on disgrace. That night, the Duke summoned her to the conservatory, where moonlight spilled through glass like silver wine. It was hers, he said, simply, holding the brooch between his fingers. "My mother's." Evangeline froze. "Then, it was stolen years ago." His gaze lifted, hard now, not at her, but at the shadows around them. "Someone seeks to shame us both." "Us?" she echoed. "Do you mean me, Your Grace?" He stepped closer, the formality cracking. "Do not provoke me, Evangeline. I have borne 7 years of whispers, but I will not see your name dragged through the mire." Something inside her broke. "My name was in the mire long before tonight. You think I did not hear them? You think I do not feel the pity that clings to me like perfume? Her voice trembled, yet her spine did not bend. They call me the porcelain duchess because you made me cold. The words hung between them, raw, forbidden. He stared at her as though seeing her for the first time, as though the woman before him had finally dared strike back. The music from the ballroom drifted faintly through the glass, waltz rhythms fading into melancholy. The Duke's voice dropped to a near whisper. If I could tell you why. Then tell me. But he said nothing. She turned, gathering her skirts, and walked away, her reflection fragmenting across the mirrored panes. Behind her, his hand tightened around the brooch until the metal bit his skin. When the door closed, he looked down and saw a smear of blood upon the violet enamel, a mark as small as a confession, as damning as love itself. The storm began just after dusk, a tempest that battered Evermere Hall with the fury of 7 silent years. Rain lashed against the windows like the beating of restless wings, and thunder rolled through the moors, shaking the chandeliers. The servants had retired early, uneasy with the weather and the tension that hung thicker than the air. In the great library, the hearth glowed fierce and amber, the only light in a house divided by pride. Evangeline stood before the fire, her reflection caught in the glass of the rain-darkened window. She wore no jewels, no pretense, only a gown of soft gray silk that clung to her like resignation. The violet brooch lay on the mantel, glinting in the flames, its enamel surface marred by a faint streak of dried blood. She had not seen the Duke since their quarrel in the conservatory, though she had heard his carriage return late, the sound of hooves muffled by storm and shame. When the door opened, she did not turn. She knew his footsteps too well, measured, deliberate, the gait of a man who hid turmoil behind restraint. Edmund entered quietly, but the storm announced him anyway, a gust of wind sweeping in before he shut the door. His coat was damp, his hair unkempt, his eyes shadowed with something far more dangerous than anger, resolve. "You should not be here alone," he said, his voice low, worn thin by something deeper than fatigue. She did not face him. "I have been alone for 7 years. I am quite accomplished at it." He exhaled sharply, as though her words struck somewhere unguarded. "I did not come to quarrel. Then for what purpose?" She turned slowly, her expression poised, her tone not. "To accuse me again? To reclaim the dignity you believe I've tarnished?" He stepped closer, the firelight painting his features in shades of gold and sorrow. "No, to confess." For the first time, she faltered. The word hung between them, fragile as a thread. "Confess." He nodded, his throat tightening. "You ask why. Why I left you untouched. Why I turned our vows into a prison. You deserve to know the truth, even if it ruins us both." The rain drummed harder, as if urging him on. He moved to the hearth, resting one hand on the mantel beside the brooch. "It began before our wedding. There were matters concerning my family, debts of honor and blood. My father, you recall his death was called sudden?" "Yes," she whispered. "A heart ailment, they said." "They lied. He took his own life." She gasped, her composure shattering like glass. "My God!" Edmund's jaw clenched. "He left a letter, one I have kept locked for years. In it, he confessed to ruining your father. Gambling, deceit, manipulation. The Moreau downfall was of Harland making. Our marriage was his atonement, his final command to me." The truth struck her breathless. She gripped the edge of the chair to steady herself. "You married me out of guilt?" "No," his answer came swift, raw. "At first, yes. But then I saw you, truly saw you, and guilt turned to something I feared far more." She stared at him, torn between fury and an ache that trembled through her chest. "And so you punished me for your father's sins?" "I punish myself," he said hoarsely. "Every night I stood outside your chamber door, and every night I turned away, because I thought touching you, loving you, would make me no better than the man who destroyed your family." The fire cracked, sending up sparks like broken stars. He turned toward her, his face etched with torment. "You think me proud, cold, unfeeling. But I was only a coward hiding behind righteousness. I told myself silence was virtue. That distance was mercy, and in doing so, I made you a ghost in your own life. Evangeline's eyes shimmered, though no tear dared fall. She moved closer, the hem of her gown whispering across the rug. You think confession repairs 7 years of solitude? She asked quietly. That truth, once spoken, heals what neglect has carved into the bone? No, he said, but it is a beginning. She laughed softly, bitterly, a beginning built on ashes. He looked at her then, truly looked, and something inside him broke. Tell me what you wish me to do, he said. Command me, curse me, anything but this silence between us. Her gaze softened, though her voice did not. I do not wish to curse you. I wish you had trusted me before your guilt became our marriage. The air trembled with all that could not be said. The storm outside howled. Within, the fire dimmed to a quiet glow. For a long while neither spoke. Finally she whispered, Why now? He hesitated. Because the scandal forced me to see what I've done. Because every rumor that touches your name wounds me more than I can bear. Because I have lived 7 years in fear of myself, and tonight I am done being afraid. He reached out, slowly, as though approaching something sacred. His hand hovered inches from hers, the space between them alive with years of longing. She did not pull away, yet she did not move forward. Evangeline, he murmured, her name sounding like an apology and a prayer. If I could undo it all. She shook her head. Do not wish for the impossible. Do what remains possible. He frowned. And what is that? Let me decide if I can forgive you. Her fingers brushed his, feather-light, hesitant, and the contact burned through both of them. The moment was brief but searing, as though the fire itself had leapt between their hands. He closed his eyes, the smallest sigh escaping his lips, a sound caught between relief and pain. A knock shattered the stillness. The door creaked open, revealing a servant drenched from the storm. Your Grace, he said breathlessly, addressing Edmund. Lady Beatrice has arrived. She insists the matter cannot wait. Edmund's eyes widened. Beatrice? The name struck something sharp in Evangeline. Your confidant, she said softly, her tone knife-edged with realization. The one who knows your secrets. He turned toward her, stricken. It is not what you think. Of course it isn't, she replied, though her voice trembled. It never is. The servant lingered, uncertain. Edmund hesitated, torn between duty, explanation, and the woman whose trust had already been raised to embers. At last he said, I will return. Wait for me here. But when he was gone, the room seemed colder. The rain softened, as if exhausted by its own grief. Evangeline stared into the fire, her reflection shivering in the glass. On the mantel, the violet brooch gleamed faintly, the blood upon it catching the light. Then, faint through the corridor, she heard voices. His and another's low and urgent. She caught only fragments through the door's thin wood. She must never know, not yet, for her sake. The words sliced through her composure. Her heart stilled, then began to race. Not yet. The flames guttered, the light faltering against the storm. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, realization dawning like a wound reopening. He had confessed one truth, but not all. The following evening, Evermere Hall stood aglow once more, its windows blazing against the dusk like 1,000 watchful eyes. The storm had passed, leaving behind a damp chill and skies streaked with pewter light. The Duke had commanded the house to prepare for a masquerade, a final gathering before the season's end, though whispers said it was something more. Those who received invitations sensed a reckoning beneath the gilded words. The Duchess, however, had not been told its purpose at all. Evangeline stood before her mirror as her maid pinned the final comb into her hair. The reflection that stared back seemed foreign, a woman carved from composure and defiance both. Her gown was of pale gold satin, soft as sunrise. Around her throat, a ribbon of black velvet, simple yet striking. She felt neither bride nor wife tonight, but something in between, a ghost learning how to breathe again. Rumors from the night before gnawed at her. She must never know, not yet for her sake. The words circled like vultures. What truth could still be hidden after all that had been confessed? The thought sickened her, and yet a grim calm settled over her heart. If the Duke had built their marriage on half-truths, then she would face the whole of it, not as the obedient duchess he once abandoned, but as a woman determined to see him without illusion. When she descended the staircase, masked guests already filled the hall, a glittering sea of silk and whispers. Beneath chandeliers that glowed like captured constellations, laughter mingled with the sweep of strings. She caught glimpses of painted masks, jeweled fans, 1,000 secrets moving beneath candlelight. The atmosphere was heady, alive with the delicious deceit only a masquerade could sanction. And there, across the room, stood Edmund. He was masked in black, though his posture betrayed him instantly, proud, restrained, every line of his body honed to stillness. Yet tonight, something restless flickered in his bearing. He was no longer the untouchable Duke of Evermere, but a man standing at the edge of a precipice of his own making. Their eyes met across the ballroom. She did not look away. For a long, suspended moment, the crowd seemed to vanish, only the space between them pulsing with all that had been withheld. Then, deliberately, she turned from him and joined the dancers. It was Lord Pembroke who claimed her hand first, smirking behind his fox's mask. "How cruel of his grace to let you dance unattended," he murmured. "Cruelty requires intent," she replied coolly. "Neglect is its own art." He laughed, charmed and unsettled, but she no longer listened. Every turn of the waltz brought her nearer to the Duke's gaze. When the music swelled to its crescendo, she felt his presence before she saw him. The crowd parted. Pembroke bowed and released her hand. "May I?" came Edmund's voice, low, steady, and far too calm. She inclined her head. "If you must." They moved together, two ghosts bound by rhythm, gliding beneath the chandelier's shimmer. The years between them compressed into a fragile heartbeat. His gloved hand at her waist felt both alien and achingly familiar. "I did not expect to see you here," he said quietly. "I was told this was a farewell gathering," she answered. "I came to learn what we are saying farewell to." His step faltered. "Who told you that?" "London," she said, a hint of scorn beneath her breath. "London tells everything. They say you intend to free me." He said nothing, but his silence confirmed it. Her voice softened, trembling between fury and disbelief. "An annulment, then. After 7 years of pretending, you would now make our farce complete." "It is not a farce," he replied sharply. "It is mercy." "Mercy," she repeated, her tone like ice fracturing. "You destroy me and call it mercy." The dance ended. Applause swelled, drowning their final step. He bowed. She curtsied, the perfect image of civility. Yet, as she turned to leave, his hand caught hers. "Meet me in the North Gallery," he murmured. "Please." The word "please" startled her more than any command could have. The gallery was nearly empty, lit only by candelabra that threw long, trembling shadows upon the portraits. Beyond the arched windows, the night pressed close and still. She stood at one end, her mask discarded, her breath shallow. When he entered, the door clicked softly shut behind him. "I owe you an explanation," he said. "You owe me the truth," she countered. He hesitated, then removed his mask. The sight of his face, unguarded, almost vulnerable, sent an ache through her chest. "You overheard me last night," he began. "You were not wrong. There is more I did not say." "Then speak it," she demanded. In the torment of guessing, he drew a breath. "After my father's death, I received not 1 letter, but 2. The second came from a woman he wronged, Lady Beatrice." Her name struck the air like a spark. Evangeline's stomach turned cold. She knew of the debts, the lies. She was the keeper of every sin he concealed. She swore that if I touched you, if I claimed happiness when your family had been ruined by mine, she would expose it all. She promised to destroy you as she once destroyed him. Evangeline's lips parted. "Lady Beatrice?" "She loved my father," Edmund said bitterly, "and when he chose my mother, her love curdled to vengeance. She wanted his heir to suffer his punishment. I believed her threats. I thought by keeping my distance I could protect you from scandal, from the ruin she promised. And so you protected me by shattering me instead," she said softly. He closed his eyes. Yes. Silence filled the gallery, deep, aching final. The candles hissed, wax dripping in slow surrender. When he looked at her again, there was no defense left in him. I loved you, Evangeline. From the first moment I saw you in that chapel, I loved you. But I loved you wrongly, with fear instead of faith. She felt something tighten, then break within her. Do you think this confession absolves you? She asked, her voice trembling with restrained pain. That I will thank you for your noble suffering? No, his voice roughened. I think it will condemn me. But you deserve the truth before I let you go. He took from his pocket a folded document, sealed with wax, her freedom. He held it out to her, hand unsteady. An annulment, signed, witnessed, and waiting only for your name. She stared at it as though it were a weapon. And what will you do then? Disappear, he said simply. I have estates abroad. You shall have Evermere. You will be free to live as you please, untainted by my name. Her fingers brushed the parchment. And if I refuse, then I will remain your husband in name only as I have always been. The words should have freed her. Instead, they hollowed her. You speak of freedom as though it were a gift, yet you have never asked what I wish to be freed from. He looked at her, confused. From the ache of being unseen, she whispered. From waking each morning knowing my worth is measured by your silence. Her tears finally fell, slow, defiant. He reached for her, hesitated, then let his hand fall. I am sorry, he said again, almost brokenly. She stepped closer until only a breath divided them. Do you know what I have learned, Edmund? That pride is the cruelest jailer of all. It binds both victim and offender. You sought to save me from shame, but it was your own you feared most. He flinched as though struck. Her hand rose, trembling, and brushed his cheek. You have built your life upon the notion that love is dangerous. Perhaps it is, but indifference is far worse. His breath caught, a shuddered exhale of years collapsing. The document slipped from his hand, landing between them like a fallen verdict. If I sign it, she said softly, you will think yourself noble. If I refuse, you will call me sentimental. But tell me, Edmund, which fate frightens you more? To be unloved or to be forgiven? The question struck him mute. For the first time, his mask of composure fractured entirely. I do not deserve your forgiveness. Deserving has nothing to do with it. The music from the ballroom swelled faintly through the corridor, a waltz soft and yearning. She bent, lifted the annulment from the floor, and tore it cleanly in two. The pieces fluttered to the ground like pale birds. Gasps rose from the doorway. Guests had gathered, drawn by curiosity and rumor. Yet Evangeline did not flinch. She turned toward them, chin lifted, and took her husband's hand before the entire glittering world that had pitted her. You wish to free me, she said clearly, but I free myself, not from you but from shame. The crowd murmured. The Duke, stunned, could only stare. And then, slowly, he bowed his head, the first surrender of a man who had built his life upon pride. When he lifted it again, his eyes shone with something unguarded, dangerous, and utterly human. Before he could speak, a familiar voice cut through the murmurs. Touching, drawled Lady Beatrice, stepping forward with a folded letter in her gloved hand. But before you both drown in noble sentiment, perhaps the Duchess should see the real confession your husband kept. Evangeline's heart stilled. The hall went silent. The Duke's face drained of color. Beatrice smiled, a serpent among angels. Shall I read it aloud? The hall froze in a hush that felt almost holy, as if time itself paused to watch pride unravel. Lady Beatrice stood near the dais, her gloved fingers toying with the letter like a cat savoring its kill. Her eyes gleamed with malice born of long decay. Evangeline felt her pulse hammering against her ribs. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet she stood rooted, the echo of torn parchment still lingering between her and Edmund. Read it, said Evangeline quietly. Beatrice smiled. Gladly. She broke the seal, her voice slicing through the silence. I write these words not in confession, but in cowardice. If she learns what my father did to hers, How the fortune that bought Evermere was stolen through deceit and ruin, she will never look upon me again. So I shall bind her with distance, with silence, with the lie of indifference, and call it virtue. For love would demand truth, and truth would destroy her. The crowd gasped. Beatrice's smile widened, victorious. Your noble duke's first act as husband, deceit, inherited and perfected. Evangeline's throat tightened, yet she did not collapse as Beatrice expected. Instead, she turned, slowly, deliberately to face Edmund. His expression was desolate, his composure shattered beyond repair. It is true, he said hoarsely. Every word. I wanted to tell you from the beginning. But I feared you would see me as he was, a man who bought your family's ruin and called it legacy. And so, she said softly, you let me live believing myself unworthy of your touch? He took a step toward her, desperation in his eyes. I thought I was sparing you shame. You spared me nothing. Her voice trembled, then steadied. You condemned me to it. Gasps rustled like wind through silk. The ballroom's light seemed dimmer, the air weighted with judgment. Yet Evangeline no longer cared for the eyes upon her. Her world had narrowed to the man before her, proud, broken, and at last unmasked. Do you love me? She asked. The question struck like lightning. He froze. Answer me, Edmund, she pressed. Not as the Duke, not as the son of your father, as the man who has hidden behind every excuse but truth. His breath shuddered. I do. God forgive me, I do. It is the one truth I never dared speak, because I feared what it would demand of me. And what does it demand now? She whispered. He looked at her as though she were light itself. Everything. With that, he crossed the space between them. The crowd vanished from his awareness. Even Beatrice's smirk dissolved in the wake of his resolve. He dropped to one knee, not with ceremony but surrender. I have been my father's son for too long, he said, his voice breaking. Bound by guilt, by pride, by the sins of the dead. But tonight, I choose to be your husband. Not for forgiveness, not for legacy, but because I can no longer breathe without you. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks, unashamed. Around them, the spectators held their breath. The masquerade, the gossip, all of it faded into something smaller than the sound of her heartbeat. She reached for him, her hand trembling as it touched his face. The hall seemed to exhale. Then stand, she said softly, for I will not have a husband who kneels in shame, but one who stands beside me in truth. He rose. Slowly, she placed her palm against his chest, over the heart that had remained locked for 7 years. He caught her hand there, holding it as though anchoring his very soul. I cannot undo the years I wasted, he whispered. Then do not try, she murmured. Live what remains. For a heartbeat, silence reigned, the kind that trembles before something irrevocable. Then, before the glittering eyes of society that had pitted her and envied him, the Duke of Evermere drew his wife into his arms. It was not a chaste embrace, nor one born of apology, but of awakening. The room gasped as he lowered his head, his lips finding hers with all the restraint of years undone. The kiss was fierce, trembling, reverent, a reclamation of time lost, of love denied. Lady Beatrice's letter fluttered from her hand, forgotten. Her vengeance dissolved beneath the quiet awe that rippled through the crowd. For once, scandal bowed before sincerity. When at last they parted, Evangeline's eyes met Edmund's, calm, luminous, unafraid. You have touched me now, she said softly. Not in body alone, but in truth. Do not lose that again. I swear it, he breathed. By every lie I ever told, I swear I will never hide from you again. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, the remnant of a storm fading into peace. Candlelight flickered across their faces, gilding them in gold and shadow. The guests began to murmur once more, but it no longer mattered. The world could whisper what it pleased. For the first time, they stood not as strangers bound by duty, but as equals bound by choice. When they turned toward the doors, side by side, the music began anew, a quiet waltz, tender and unhurried. Their hands entwined, their steps matched, and though the night still carried its ghosts, they walked through them unflinching. Behind them, the torn letter and its ashes lay forgotten beneath the glow of the chandeliers. Ahead, the great doors opened to the waiting dawn, and as they crossed the threshold, the Duke, at long last, touched his wife again, not with hesitation, not with guilt, but with love unguarded and whole.